Hey, Tyrone.
Yeah, Christina, how are you?
Good, how are you? And yes, we are streaming, just so you know.
Okay, there was a question I had. Um, oh, maybe I'll take it off the streaming.
You want to call me after or text and then
Yes, yeah, yeah, it's,
okay.
yeah, I'll be appropriate after. Yeah.
Howdy, howdy.
Hi, this is being already live streamed.
Good evening, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I apologize for the delay. I somehow did not have the link. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I guess I'll give folks another minute or two to join. Christina, I guess Christina's not here, right? Let me just text her to see if she knows of any other members who are supposed to join. Christina, is this everyone, or I think we usually have a Corey's usually in attendance, and I think another board member, right? Besides Corey.
Yeah, policy has
Krister, I
quite
think
a
Krister,
few.
right? I think.
Policy has quite a few people. Policy has, yeah, Francoise, but I think she's traveling, so she won't be able to join. Yes, Corey, Shantae, and Stephen Wilson. Let me text them.
Let me just go lock my door.
Okay, Miss Brody did say she will be joining soon, and I also texted Mr. Wilson. Board Member Wilson, let me say, because we have three Wilsons on this call, or we will.
We were also supposed to add Shantae Brody's request to the
Yeah, it's
agenda,
on there.
her policy.
It's on there.
Oh, you're right. I just did not recognize it by that name. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the name of the actual policy, yes, that she
Yeah,
wants. Yeah.
okay. Okay. Hello. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Today is June 2nd, June already. For our policy committee meeting. My name is Ruth Fortune, and I'm the chair of the committee. We have a fairly light agenda compared to prior meetings today, so hopefully we can get through it in record time. The first item is the second reading for challenging behavior prevention restorative practices response policy. I will let you open that, Christina.
Miss Attorney Ed Wilson is on the call for this.
Thank you, everyone. So this is a required one of the required K policies that we're required to have for July 2025. What this policy captures is the restorative practice response. Before I kind of dive into this, I will note that in our student discipline policy, which is at 5131, it talks about the option to utilize restorative practices as opposed to other forms of discipline like in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, etc. What's great about this policy is that it actually unpacks what that could and should look like, packaged with definitions about restorative practices response and behaviors where restorative practices should be utilized. And then it actually at page 2, as you scroll along in the document, it provides further guidance as to the benefits of or goals of the restorative practice response in terms of relationship building, the accountability, community safety, and competency development. This work kind of further unpacks and provides more substance to what we've already acknowledged as a district in our student discipline policy as to providing more guidance on what the restorative practices response and approach should look like. So that's the actual policy. In terms of kind of implementation and how we socialize this. We're doing work, and I believe Deputy Ratley's on the call, doing work on student code of conduct with district leaders, etc. So in terms of kind of making sure we're socializing this with building leaders as we walk into next year, that work will start in that group. And
Thank you for that, Attorney Wilson.
Thank you.
Based on the document, I think the only two things really left to do is just to add Hartford in those two blanks, since we're adopting it from the CABE model policy. I did cross-reference I did double check, I should say, the reference to the climate policy, and it is indeed 5131.911. So I think we're good there. Do we have any questions from anyone or comments? Sakinal?
Thank you, Chair. My just quick question is, since it just says that it is a recommended policy or whatever the wording was on top, I'm just curious if this has been, I know you said that it's been circulated with building leaders, but has it been circulated with any teacher groups just to ensure that like on the ground folks that have to implement this have had their say in it? I mean, not being in the school, I don't really know how this would work in practice, so just curious how that's been circulated.
I could respond to that. So I want to capture, it's actually a required policy. So it's on the top there, it indicates it's a required policy for July 2025.
I was just saying that it says a model policy to consider.
Okay.
Next to require. So I just wasn't sure if there, if we could make if there were any changes that we should consider making, I guess is my question.
Yeah. Okay. So So we've adopted it as the CAVE model. I guess to answer your question in terms of has it been socialized and the plan to socialize it, we've been doing work in that code of conduct group that I mentioned previously. The union's actually part of that group. The HFT leadership is actually part of that group as well in other district leaders. So this particular, in terms of kind of like how this funnels down, that would be the next area that this policy is socialized as we walk into next school year. So this is some of the summer work walking forward, if that's responsive to your question.
All right, thank you for that exchange. Board Member Hockenhall and Attorney Wilson, Board Member Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess Attorney Wilson, and I guess maybe to a leadership. My question about the policy. I'm not a legal scholar to comb through all the ends of it, but is there a way in which we roll it out or how we implement it where we are sure that the consequence for the offense is effective? There's a lot of verbiage here that talks about reducing expulsions, which I understand at a district level is something that we all desire to do. For me, well, let me stop there. Let me ask a question about effectiveness of how, is that something that's going to be a goal of how this is implemented?
So this is a great question. The way I'm understanding the question, and again, I think there's a lot of intangibles that go into a response to that. There's a lot. So the building leader, right, is going to be the lead on kind of what the consequence should be. So I guess to the effectiveness of the consequence, all the consequences that are on the table in the student discipline policy, which is at 5131, those are still available to the building administrator as they're considering what's the best consequence for this particular student based on what occurred. I think this particular policy really kind of doubles down on how and unpacks this restorative practice response and how it should look. Not naming that this is the only avenue that we could go in, but if a restorative practice response is the most appropriate based on the assessment of that building administration staff, then provides further guidance as to how that could look, and what that kind of means for the benefit of that particular school community. I understand your question. I feel like there's a lot of competing intangibles as to how the principal might land on what the most appropriate discipline is in that situation, which still would come out of that 5131. And I guess the second part there in terms of kind of like how are we coaching up our building administrations on what's most appropriate, maybe kind of just like baseline, baseline kind of standards. What we do, like I guess in terms of like just to talk about expulsions for a second, we're not pushing forward expulsions unless someone in district leadership is approving those packets. So I think that's how we kind of streamline to make sure there's some kind of consistency throughout the district on that level of discipline.
Repeat what you just said about not pushing.
So expulsion, the determination to move towards expulsion is not an independent determination that's made by a building principal. There's a through line with district leadership on approving an expulsion packet. So that's how we maintain that there's consistency of approaches across our schools in terms of what might lead to an expulsion in one space should be consistent in other spaces. Does that?
Yeah, I want to get right at that because to me, that feels like a rub thing right there. Like, in saying what you're saying, then to me, it should then be pretty crystal clear to building staff what constitutes the reason to remove a child from a classroom or to remove a child from school. And so I guess my follow-up question then, as a district, are we tracking, right? Do we know how often school-based staff recommend expulsion, and that's overturned at a district level. If it's more than 5%, let's talk about it. Because to me, we should be pretty clear. And so, do we know how often that happens?
That's an answer that we can provide because we would know. I
Yes.
don't have that answer as I'm responding to your question, but that's certainly a number we can give you or do the research to be able to track that.
I think yes. The reason I'm having this conversation here is I want to make sure that restorative practice is not shorthand for, and so we want to expel students. I just want to make sure that that's not the shorthand.
In terms of using it as opposed to expelling, is that what you're saying?
Yes, because to me, restoration is the appropriate response after a young person has experienced a consequence. And so if so the next question, I'm sorry, through the chair, chair, I'm not trying to dominate this, but through you, I guess then the next thing I want to ask is, do we have active and robust in-school suspensions in all our buildings? Because that's not what I've heard.
In terms of the ability to utilize in-school suspensions?
Do we actually have in-school suspension facilities staffed with people?
I could offer a response from the chair. So
Yes, please.
okay. I don't know if I would use the term facilities, right? So it depends on kind of like the makeup of the building, right? So like in-school suspension can be monitored. Like if a child gets in-school suspension, it could be a BT that's in that space. It could be, some other school staff that's there. Now again, we're in a space as a school district where some of this requires some creativity based on reductions of staff. So how it looked in some buildings last year might not necessarily be how it looks in the upcoming year. But a space a certain building would utilize may not be the same space another building would utilize for this particular program. So there's some spaces where kind of like if we're talking about a student needs to be supervised, have instruction, have a way to do their work, that would be like the consistent pieces. But in terms of like, are there in-school suspension facilities?
I don't want to get stuck on the word through the chair. What I'm really saying is that in a school, if I go there, are we saying constructively, should I expect to go to each school in the district and see, here's how in-school suspension is conducted in this school? Is that something I'm going to find if I go from school to school in the district?
You should be able to find that.
Okay. All right.
Now, there's certain schools that would not be, I mean, we're at a certain grade level, right? Like, so if you go to, a K4, that might not be something that they're utilizing.
So what grades do we use in-school suspension?
The policy doesn't, like, I would.
That's what I'm asking you at the district level, because this has to be us. A policy probably won't tell us something that detailed.
Yeah, and this is where we could unpack the administrative regs when we get into that level of detail. But we're not going to find that in the discipline.
Okay.
5131 is not going to unpack that for us either.
Correct. But so through the chair, the reason we're having this conversation through chair is if you're not going to have expulsion, and if then the school does not have an in-school suspension model, now we've limited the tools by which the school potentially has at their disposal to actually implement the consequence. That's the reason I'm having this conversation, because you mentioned that there's a list of things that the school can have, and so I just want to make sure if it's on the list that we then put some energy to make sure that it's available every place it should be available, so it is a legitimate consequence.
Can I respond through the chair?
Yeah, certainly. It just took me a
Thank you.
second to hit my unmute button.
And Mr. Walker, and I apologize if I misunderstood the question. What my response wasn't intended to communicate that expulsions are off the table or the district cannot utilize expulsions. What I was expressing is that this restorative practice policy gives us robust guidance on what restorative practices response can be. Whereas if you look at the student discipline policy at 5131, it did not go into this level of detail about the restorative practices approach. What this does is actually provides a lot more guidance on what that could look like and what that benefit of that is for a school community. I didn't mean to imply at all that for the proper student discipline issue and concern and offense that expulsions couldn't be utilized. In fact, there's certain things that were required to use expulsions under law that there's not even the ability to deviate from.
Thank you. And through the chair, I guess I'll wrap up here with the action that you talked about the regs. So maybe outside of this venue, can we look at all the regulations, the district level regulations that help explain how this is implemented? Can we have that as an action? And the second piece would be the action to let's detail where in-school suspension is held in the district and how that takes place.
Yes, Dr. Ratley?
Yes, I just wanted to, through you, if it's okay to respond to Board Member Walker.
Of course, please.
That yes, we could absolutely make that information available to you and to the entire board. I think one thing to keep in mind is what Attorney Wilson mentioned earlier about the committee that's currently working on the code of conduct, so that if anything changes, we definitely want to present the most recent information that takes into account this policy as well as all of the information that you're requesting. That's all I have to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this policy? Okay, thank you. My only request is when we present it to the board for us to formally adopt, can we please just have the blanks filled in? Just for all the policies, it's slightly uncomfortable for me when we're voting on a policy and someone points out that it still says may and shall when we discussed that it should say shall, not may and shall. So if we can just have really the final polished version in our board meeting agendas, that would be great. Second item under our discussion agenda, first item, second thing we're discussing today, is the renaming of Classical Magnet School application. I requested that we add this to the agenda specifically because as we're approaching being able to actually vote on this application request, I think we ought to be strategic and iron out some of the details that, frankly, up until they were brought to my attention, I had not considered, particularly about how do we operationalize this name change should the board vote to change the name of the school. I floated the idea, maybe it makes sense to have some people internally who would be involved in whatever it takes when a school's name changes, updating the website, updating the printed materials, any public facing information, and certainly some people from the school itself as well in terms of what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. So that way, when we're voting, I would like to be able to make a motion not just with yay or nay to the renaming, but with specific conditions as to how we proceed if we vote in, how the renaming will go on, right? So do we change the name in front of the building? What is the time frame for that? Do we try to fundraise to do it? I don't think we want to get money from our budget at this time to change a signage in front of a school. How much discretion do we give the school in some other areas, say the children's uniforms? Like if we change a name, will the uniform at some point transition to reflect the new name, or do they just keep that entirely, or is it up to the school to make that change? So those types of details that someone who's making this request, understandably so, is not thinking about, because they're not doing the running of the school and the operations of the school from day to day. I think we need to involve the people who will be making those decisions now, so that we have a clear, clear motion on what we're voting, and also so we don't sort of dump hard decisions on the school at that time. We just do a simple vote, and then they have to figure out all the things that we haven't worked out. So those are my thoughts. I see quite a few hands up. Happy to take comments in order. So I will first with Board Member Brody, then Board Member Darcel Ledger, then Board Member Walker.
Thank you. Yeah, I had some questions about the cost of the new signage. Also, at some point in time, I'm hoping that we could get before us the uniform policy, because it has always been my understanding that students are required to wear the color, but the written name on shirts, and over the years it has been debated one way or the other. And then some schools was even only using a certain vendor, and parents couldn't use a different vendor, or vendors who wanted to make certain logos for certain shirts. But it has always been my understanding that you're required to wear the color, but all of those special names and stuff, that was optional. The other thing I wanted to mention is, and it was a discussion a couple years ago, but I think I had clarity, but we still kind of move away from it. We talk about a theme as the school name, like Annie Fisher is not a good example, because it's Annie Fisher Montessori and it's Annie Fisher STEM. We have made a habit of calling themes like environmental sciences at Mary Hooker. No, it's Mary Hooker environmental, like these school, and I'm mentioning because we're on the topic of school names. These schools are named after these individuals for the reason that's playing out right in front of us right now, right? And we're going to themes, and we're not calling schools schools. So we had agreed a couple years ago that we would actually start calling schools schools. A theme is at the school, but we started again to divert to the theme and not the name of the school. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Darcel Ledger.
Yes, thank you and good afternoon. If I may, with regards to the uniform situation, I have a child who attends a Hartford Public School, one of the Hartford Public Schools, a magnet school, and my child, has to wear the name has to be on the on the uniform shirt. Pants, it could be khaki or whatever the color is that's required, and that can be purchased anywhere. However, the shirt has to be, we have to go to a specific vendor, and we're required to have that particular logo on there, the name. So the question I have with regards to the uniform policy, and should we change the name, is for parents who have already purchased the name, for example, classical, and the shirt says classical. Would it remain as classical, or would the name change? And if the name does change, would the students who already have those shirts, will there be some type of voucher for those students or for those families who already have purchased money to have those shirts, And also, how will that work as opposed to just keeping it the way it is, and adding the name on the, on the signage, if you will. That's all I have.
Thank you. I can comment a little bit on that. So specifically with respect to at least this request, it's an addition to the name, so classical will remain there. It would be the Hernan LaFontaine Classical Magnet School. So I think for me personally, that's one of the things I would want to leave to the discretion of the school, what they want to do about the uniform, because arguably they could choose to change it gradually over time, or it could just remain classical. Or as new students enroll, they can request a newer version if they choose to have a newer version. But that is the type of thing I would want to leave to the school's discretion. But other matters like how the name of the school appears in marketing materials, does it move to H for Hernan? Does it move to L for LaFontaine? Does it stay under C for classical? I know we don't have a uniform approach to how we alphabetize schools, but I think whatever people are used to for this school, my understanding is there's some arguments for keeping it that way so that it comes up in searches as usual. So there's a lot of moving pieces to that, but the uniform I think will be one of the simpler ones because classical remains part of the name of the school.
Can I help you out, Madam Chair?
Sure.
With traditionally, right? So maybe we need to look at the uniform policy. I've never bought a logo for either one of my kids. Never. You wear the color of the school, the shirt. So maybe we can look at the uniform policy, but so when there has been changes, right? If you have a shirt, it always is like you can wear it until you already have the shirt, and it's like, nope, we're not wearing that shirt anymore. We're changing the shirt. So I've seen it across the years that you can continue wearing your shirt until for the life of the shirt, really. But when purchasing new shirts, the vendor would, of course, have the new name for those who desire to buy, from new shirts going forward. But maybe we do need for it to be clarification of how we, like what you said, as far as like how will we alphabetize. We decided as a board, and it was confirmed by the superintendent, the school name is the legal school name. We are the ones as Hartford Public Schools that have been putting the theme before the name. So maybe an action item is to revisit that, so that we know that's what we're doing when we're looking for a school. Because sometimes, like when I scroll and look, you got to figure out, like, is it the school or the theme? Because some are one way and some are the other. But if an action item could be to at least if we could be talking about the uniform policy and what parents are obligated to do, because that one thing is certain schools try to implement certain rules around that. So it will be good for board members as we are dealing with our communities to know what it really is and what it should be. And if parents are communicated something differently, we can stand on the fact that it's supposed to be this way. So that will be helpful as we engage our community.
Thank you for those comments. I just want to point everyone's attention to the message from our board chair that says essentially every school has its own sort of version of the uniform policy. So it seems like we have a overall policy, but each school gets to sort of supplement and do their own version of that. But certainly something we can revisit at another meeting. Turning it over to Board Member Walker, then Board Member Wilson.
Oh, apologies. Thank you, Chair. I'm unmuted now. The last comment you brought up emphasize that we have district policies, and then there are like regulations and things but beneath it. And that was one of the reasons I had the conversation with Attorney Wilson. I think we need to understand where regulations exist in the district and what they are, because you're correct. These regulations are how we implement the policy, and so every school may implement it a little bit different. But your first question was about, to me, you brought up a lot of operational issues. I think they were very good, in terms of signage and all the things that have to change. I would ask that maybe we notionally come up with the list like that and maybe get feedback from others. But in essence, we have resources within the district that can handle those questions, right? They're operational questions and logistical questions. And so I would invite us, at a board level to vote on the change and then potentially have this list of operational issues that will have to be handled. And then those issues would then get dispatched to whomever, the operations people, the school people, and it would direct the things they maybe would think about, right, and have to do. The money issue, to me, the district has money, schools have money. Only if the expenses rise above $50,000, they need to come back to the board. So I don't believe that necessarily we need to get involved with how each and every expense of a school gets handled. But again, to have a list of these things that would get deployed down to the school and the operations staff, facility staff, and then they report back to us if they had issues or concerns. But I would just maybe recommend that so that our work doesn't get held up until all those details get answered, because typically after we make a decision, there can be a timeline to get all of those concerns addressed before they're actually implemented at a site. That'd be my feedback.
Thank you for those comments. My sense is the opposite of what you said. I think we need to iron out those details before we thrust it upon the school that it has a name change, because then we just have disorder and chaos, right? How, some of the school's concerns, and understandably so, are things like, how will this name change affect how we appear online as a magnet school that is trying to recruit students, not just in Hartford, but also in other neighboring towns? How will it come up on the pamphlets? How does the signage in the school go? I mean, at one point there was an offer to, what if we rename that building, not necessarily the school, so that way the name of the school doesn't change for marketing purposes. I think there are substantive issues that go along with the renaming that we have to consider in tandem, not sequentially, because then we're really putting the school in a difficult position. And I think we also need to consider how we're going to pay for the related costs and get a sense of what we think that cost will be, so that we can have a game plan. I think we just have a better handle on it if we do that. And it's not that it's going to take a year. It might be like 2 weeks of just, concerted meetings, 2 months of concerted meetings and having a plan. But I personally, that's the approach that I would favor. I believe Board Member Wilson, go ahead, Board Member Walker, if you have a comment.
Just to you, Chair, everything you lifted up, I think is absolutely relevant. I am just not certain that the actual Board of Ed needs to be the space that those issues are resolved, only in the sense that we don't, all we'd be doing is refereeing that the right parties got together and ironed them out. We per se don't have the answer to those. I am just suggesting that those issues need to be answered. They need to be raised and then given to the right parties and whatnot to work all those things. That's all. As opposed to saying we can't make a decision until all of those issues are resolved. They certainly won't get resolved to us.
Right. I mean, I don't think I'm saying all of the issues, right? Like there are going to be things that are left to the discretion of the school. So those things like the uniform perhaps could be one, like it doesn't get resolved, like a final thing is made, but we know who's going to make that final decision. with the signage, with some other big things, I think those things need to be considered up front, because once there is a name change, naturally there needs to be these things that happen next that I think, even if it's not the board involved, I think once we're ready to vote, whoever is involved in that process should be presenting us with what they think it should be and what the cost will be, so that we're making an informed vote, right? Those things would inform how I vote on something like this personally. So I don't know that I could make a fully informed vote without that type of information or some of those answers ahead of time. I want to be mindful of everyone whose hands are up, so I'll stop talking and I will let Board Member Wilson, then Board Member Mills, then Board Member Darrell Ledger, in that order.
Okay, so I guess I just really it's a question more than anything. Are we expecting some of these issues to immediately be handled the year following the decision? So for example, the signage, Classical Magnet, we're going to use that as an example, has a name change. Are we expecting that the start of that next year, that the name on the building is going to immediately change? Or is that a process in itself, in terms of making sure, what that sign is going to look like, how we're going to pay for it? Is that something that can happen mid-year or a year later? Does it all have to be made? Are these decisions needing to be made specifically after we make a decision on the school name? Because it feels like some of this stuff should take time, and maybe some fundraising, depending on if there's a cost associated with it. And other things are as simple as, maybe it's just a debate between Hartford Public Schools, or a discussion between Hartford Public Schools and the school itself on how that school is promoted, for example. So just getting a sense of what your thoughts are regarding time frame for some of these issues or decisions that need to be made once the name has been changed.
Would you like me to try to respond to that, Board Member
Yeah,
Wilson? Or do
because
you want the next
because
speaker to go?
well, anyone who has some ideas to it, but if we're talking about all of the decisions that need to be made, or the things the boxes that we need to check, not everything is as urgent as they're not all weighted the same. So I guess it's more to you, because your the idea to handle this now is a good one. But for example, the signage, the signage may take months regardless, no matter how we go about the decision. So if we made a decision now on Classical Magnet, there's no way we could necessarily have the signage changed on the building by the time it opened up, because we have to order the sign, we have to maybe raise funds for it. So in general, that process alone may take some time. So that's why I'm asking the question.
No, those are, I think we're all asking good questions and fair questions. Personally, as someone who's looking at this from a big picture, I feel like if I have these questions, that means the school is going to have so many more questions. It seems unfair to just do a name change and leave it all to the school and everyone else to sort of figure out what to do. There are some big areas I think it makes sense for us to really consider. And for the family that's seeking this, right? Like, we need to set the right expectation. If I was having a school renamed after me, I don't want the name there like in 2 years or in a year. Like, I'd want to know if there's anything I could do to help expedite that. If I could contribute or fundraise, I would want to know those things. I think if we can address some of these things up front, it just sets a better timeline, it sets clearer expectations, and reduces chaos on the back end. That's where I'm coming at it from. And I'll be completely candid. I did not consider these things initially until the school brought those things to my attention. And they seem like fair things to resolve, because the school itself doesn't feel like it has the authority to figure all of that out. So that's my general sense on the matter.
Okay, so just to follow up really quickly. So then if that's the case, then I would kind of lean towards what Mr. Walker is saying, Board Member Walker is saying, in getting a list together and then sort of hashing out who each particular subject, who does it fall under? Because some of this may just fall to the district, and it's not up to the school itself. So I think we need more information on what in this change, what responsibility falls where.
So, I mean, in the interest of time, I don't want to like belabor the point. I think we're all saying that these things need to happen. I think the disagreement is on when these things need to happen. I think these things need to precede a board vote, not occur after a board vote. Whether or not, right, at some point we need to figure it out. I just think it's better to do it before we vote on it. I'll stop there. And I think Board Member Mills, you're next, and then Board Member Darrell Ledger.
All right, everybody. Be prepared. I agree with Ruth, like on a lot. Like a lot of the things she just said. I personally would not want to take any vote whatsoever without understanding the full financial impact of said vote. Like I think that's an incredibly important thing to do, is that we understand exactly what we are agreeing to do by changing the name of a school. I think in order to do our jobs not correctly, like I don't want to, like there's no judgment on that, but like I do think it would behoove us to take the time to understand the full financial repercussions of changing the name of a school. I also think that when we asked this question, I think maybe in the last board meeting, the last policy meeting, Deputy Foster mentioned something along the lines of like there being an internal sort of like vetting process for like the candidates and on who we should be considering for honors like this. I think that we have this particular moment to sort of, as you know, Chairperson Fortune was saying, and setting a precedent. And I think that while it might suck a little bit for the parties that are waiting for our answer, I think doing the due diligence that this deserves, I think we set a better precedent going forward. So quite frankly, I sort of think we should, and I think this has been mentioned before, but I think we should have this conversation outside of the normal policy committee, because I don't think this is necessarily now even a policy question. I think it's more of a sort of an operational question, and I think we should be doing this in conjunction with the members of staff at the district. But I don't think that this is really the right place for this conversation, mostly because I think we should have a longer conversation, a more in-depth conversation separately from this, so that we can ask all these questions and really spend the time to think about it. I think that this is definitely more of an operational question. And I think that I personally am not voting on anything until I know exactly how much money we would be spending to even do it. So yeah, that's sort of all of my comments there. But I definitely think we should have more of a like task force for this specific thing, so we can make sure that we are setting that really good precedent. You know, also just to answer the question of like whether or not we would want to take the time to put the name on the building. Like I think as long as he knows that he's being honored in this hypothetical conversation in which we're doing the thing, like I think as long as we have something in which we can honor that person, I don't necessarily think that the name on the building immediately is the issue. It's more of having that honor and that recognition. So I don't necessarily think that needs to be a sticking point, but I do think we need to take the time to understand the financial repercussions. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Board Member Mills. I believe Board Member Darrell Ledger, you're next, and then Board Member Walker.
Thank you so much. And you know, I don't like to, you know, belabor this discussion, but I will say that I think that if we are going to vote on, you know, if we're going to approve this, if we're going to vote on this and approve it, as you said, I agree with you. We do need to know what the costs will be, but or who's paying for this, and how long it will take. I don't know if there's going to be, and that's getting. I think that would be us kind of getting into the weeds of, you know, would an RFP go out to see who would be responsible for, you know, who would be awarded to putting the sign up, who would get if there's a contract, how that would work, all the logistical pieces of it. But I think that it would be, you know, the request was to have the name, you know, the name added to the school. But I think that it would be important to have that sign up, as opposed to just being honored, because they specifically requested that the name be, their name be added to classical. That's all I have.
Thank you, Board Member Duracell-Ledger. I don't know how the family feels about a lag in when a signage would go up should this naming move forward. But I do know that Dr. LaFontaine lives in close proximity to the school. So from just the human level, I think as he drives by the school that he knows has been renamed after him, he would like to see that sign sooner rather than later, because it literally is in his backyard. So that's my guess. So all the more reason why I would want to have an expectation as to when we think it will happen, and then how we come up with the funds to do that. And I'm personally not comfortable with, when we're facing a huge deficit, using our own funds, which the policy does say it's the district's responsibility to pay for any signage and things of the sort. But if we can be strategic now and see who else will partner with us with raising these funds and coming up with those funds, then we're saving the district money if we do vote on this. Board Member Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to lift up here, at least I want to make sure we separate the reason for the naming is that we believe that someone is worthy and what they've done is such that recognition is merited. So the vote should center on that. And my concern is that, one, that I don't want in any way, shape, or form someone to be meritorious of this, and yet an actual decision be held up because there's a dollar amount that we want to understand. I mean, either the merit is there or it's not. Everything I agree needs to be understood, but I just want to make sure we get clear. The other piece of this is, if we're launching the district to actually do work, someone's got to get RFPs. The questions you asked require some actual work to be done. It would be cleaner if there was an actual decision of the board to say, we want this accomplished. Now, based on that determination of it being accomplished, then that authorizes all those things to be done. Theoretically, you're saying you want this work to be done, and potentially at the end of it, we could say, oh, it's kind of too pricey, we won't do it. So I know you're looking at me that way, but I'm saying honestly, if we're going to really honor somebody, let's make that decision. Certainly all these need to be, the details need to be understood. I just want to separate up from this conversation that says a vote will actually be held up until. Because if that's not true, then it's not true. If someone is actually meritorious of the recognition, then that decision should be made. And then that decision kicks off all this detail that needs to be understood so it can actually be implemented. I do not choose to believe that someone is meritorious of this recognition, but somehow within the district, we would say, oh, it can't be accomplished because of a price tag, right? Do you get, yeah, it's understood. I just really want to make sure that the merit is what we're deciding on, and that we understand the costing details need to be understood for its implementation. But that cost detail should not be needed for us to make the determination, does the person merit the recognition, which is really what this is saying we're trying to decide.
I mean, I have a lot to say back to this, so I'll try to be concise. First, I think that's a little bit mischaracterizing what we're saying. I don't think we're going to figure out every single detail and down to the last penny, but I think if we come up with a plan and we say we're voting, and let's say the cost of the signage will be fundraised by, families of the applicant, they will support us as we fundraise, and some funds can come from the school district or whatever combination we choose. And we say these are the areas that will be left to the school's discretion, because the school already has a list of questions in their minds. It's not going to be, 80 hours of work for members of the district to figure this stuff out. It's more so, let's be a little thoughtful. Let's set some parameters. Let's set some expectations so that when we make that vote, We know there are things to work through, but we know who's going to work through them and how we're going to work through them. So that's really what my argument is. I don't think anyone should be going out to actually get prices for signage necessarily. It's more so that we know it's going to cost money. How are we going to plan to come up with that money? And what is our time frame for coming up with that money? If we were printing our own money, sure, I would not consider the finances or anything else as a factor, but it's a real aspect of this. It's not that we're not going to vote because it costs money. We know it will cost some money. I think I'd just like to know where that money will come from and how we're going to come up with it. We raise that money if we're raising it. That's my overall point. And I don't think it's going to be a severe delay. I think if we spend about 2 months thoughtfully thinking through this, by the new school year, we'll likely have a vote and people can come back to school and have a new name if we choose to vote yes. And we can have the ribbon cutting or celebration or whatever it is that we want to do that's more instantaneous to honor that person. But we sort of know what we've queued up for the actual implementation of that vote. I feel like I've said all of that already, so I'm just restating it differently and after you've countered what I previously said, but that's still my position. Board Member Mills and then Board Member Darristell Ledger.
Yeah, you beat me to a lot of that, so I don't know how much of this I should say, but I do think that it's important to note that I don't think anybody is suggesting that Superintendent LaFontaine is not worthy of this honor. I think that's sort of a given. I mean, like, do I necessarily want to do this? No, I said it multiple times, but I don't think that means that he doesn't merit the recognition. I think we all agree that he's done amazing work that merits something, but I do think that good sort of policymakers do take into account finances before they enact policies. Like, I've spent enough time in city council meetings for the city of Hartford where they try to pass a policy and then that thing doesn't work out because after the fact, they realize that they can't actually afford to do the thing. So, like, I think out of respect for, one, the conversation, because what happens to us and, to the honoree, if we spend all of that time arguing about it, doing the thing, and then there is the entire fact of if we can't afford to do it, we look dumb. So, like, that's one thing. Not that that's the biggest consideration, but that is absolutely a thing that we should consider. But also, like, other representative bodies have offices whose sole job is the financial ramifications of the policies that they enact. And I do think that that's a very important thing for us to consider. So once again, I think that we should just set aside some time and have some sort of task force meeting where we sit down and we discuss those things. Maybe it doesn't have to be that in depth, like maybe we don't have to like cost out the physical signage, but I do think it would behoove us to have more information on how this will be accomplished before we vote on it. So that's still my suggestion, is we do this not today, but definitely take some time to plan this with the policy, like with the committee that's not just this, because it's not really, like, we passed the policy already. I don't necessarily think this is the greatest place to do this. But I do think that we do need to take that time to do all the things that, Chairwoman Fortune said. And again, Tyrone, or whatever, Board Member Walker, like, I don't think anybody disagrees with you that he merits recognition in that honor. Like, I 100% aim for myself to be sitting in front of, maybe not the Board of Ed, but like, I want some shit named after me one day. Sorry for swearing, but like, what higher honor is there for a public service than having things named after you? Streets, statues. Like, I want a statue outside City Hall. That's my goal. But like, someday I would hope that people take the time to figure out what is the financial cost. Can we do it? Is it legal? Like, I think that it is important for us to take the time to do that correctly this time so that, as more cases like this come about, we have a policy that we thought through and we have something that we can look back on and use as a framework.
Thank you. Board Member Darristell Ledger.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that it's, yes, the Superintendent LaFontaine, yes, he does merit this. However, we want to make sure that whatever we're voting on, that we can actually deliver, as Board Member Mills was, so eloquently expressing, and you as well, Chair. But the thing is, it's important that we ask all of the questions that we need to ask, and there is clarity, one for public consumption, but also so that we know how this is going to be able to be accomplished. I have reservations about just voting on this and saying, okay, yes, we'll do this without knowing how this is going to get done. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Board Member Darcel Ledger. To the comment from Board Member Wilson about this is operational, I agree, which is why I suggest that we have some people internally from the administration get together, perhaps involve members from the school so that they could figure out what the things are that they ought to have in place and how they want to go about that, and make some recommendations to us to inform how we vote. Not that, I don't think this is necessarily the group that's going to make those decisions. I personally don't have the expertise to make those decisions. I didn't even consider a lot of them until they were brought to my attention. So that's my final comment on the matter. I do appreciate the lively discussion. I think everyone had good, thoughtful points. So thank you for that. And the final item on our agenda is the powers, purposes, and duties policy. And Board Member Brody requested that we revisit this policy. So I will turn it over to her so she could frame this request for us.
Thank you. So I've searched, and I believe Ms. Santiago has searched. I can't even find when it was like real, like first read, to look for the discussion on it. So prior to this change, so I'm essentially just asking for the policy to revert back to what it was before the last revision.
Do you mind just giving everyone an overview of what the policy currently is and what it was? And then Christina, if you could just share it on the screen. I know it's a fairly short policy. I think that might be helpful because I don't know that everyone is aware of what the content of the policy is.
So prior to the change, this board voted on every principal level position. That was the baseline. With this change, I believe it's only cabinet members that this board votes on.
Christina is sharing a copy of the policy. You're correct. It said previously that for principal of schools, superintendent of schools and principals, anyone above the rank of principal, and that was revised to cross off principals and anyone above the rank of principals to only cabinet level positions.
Correct. So because I was like, there's no way I wouldn't have like really discussed this. I'm unable to find the first read of when it happened in a board meeting and what was said and all of those things. I know when it was adopted, that I was not at that board meeting. So I'm really wondering, was it ever a first read for this policy? Because I can't find that at all. But when under the old policy, because first and foremost, I believe that principals are like one of the most like important jobs. For some of the reasons that we said here, we have some of the things we talked about earlier. We have some schools that there is a lot of responsibility that this individual have over school culture, how they we even had conversations about how is inside suspension in certain schools. So this individual is the boss of our teachers. We have discussed many, many times culture and climate being an issue, which I believe they set the environment in a school, and we had the opportunity to engage with whomever was put before us. We had the opportunity to discuss with the superintendent, like, what was the SGC process? Was this their candidate that they wanted out of the others that interviewed? It just was so much that we could, that we had a say in for this very important position. And I don't remember the first read, I'll say that again. And now we have a change of policy that I don't even know who the principals are of so many schools. And I had a discussion many times because I wasn't there when it, reached the board, and they were like, oh, such and such is the principal of the school. I'm like, that's not the principal. They must be the acting principal, but they're not, because we vote on principals. So I think it keeps this board so far and out of touch with who is leading our schools and leading our children. So that's why I thought it was important for this to be brought back for the board. And I don't think it's been changed maybe 2 years, if. And then my other question was how does something get voted on without a first, the reads before it? So I was I'm questioning that too.
Thank you for debriefing this request. Board Member Walker?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I appreciate Board Member Brody bringing up this topic. I agree with her observation, but this is a question that may end up going to Attorney Mizrak or whoever's playing a parliamentarian here. I remember this discussion coming up under the previous chair, Chairman Rigor, and that I remember or recall a vote actually being made. And so to keep it clean, I'm asking Attorney Mizrak here through the chair, if a vote was taken, and if we can see that in the minutes, would it necessitate that we have to actually make a vote for the new language, as opposed to just rolling back to an older version?
Sure. So this appears to be the version that's in existence currently. So I'm looking at a hard copy. It looks like this bylaw was revised in June of 2022. I don't know if it's on the copy that is being shared, but at the bottom, it shows when the revisions occurred. So I'm assuming that's when the revision occurred. So if there was, in fact, and I'm assuming there was a vote to adopt the change, if you want to revert back to what it was and change the language, you'd have to go through that process to vote, right? Because now you're amending the language, you're revising it. So there would have to be a vote on that.
And through the chair, thank you, Attorney Mizrak. I just wanted to get that out for consumption, that I thought there was an actual record of a change. And so I'm just recommending that we make sure we actually take a vote to make sure this return of language becomes the official new version. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments on this policy? I guess my only question, I suppose I could figure it out if I look at the organizational chart, but what is the difference in number of people by switching from cabinet level positions to principals and anyone above the rank of principals? I imagine it's at least a 39 people difference because there's 39 schools and 39 principals. But is it much, much bigger than that, or?
I had missed adding it to the May meeting and there was a vote.
Christina, you're not muted if you're talking to us or if you're talking to someone else.
No, sorry, I did want to confirm that it was June 20. Actually, I could add some clarity right now. I might as well just say it. The first reading, and hold on, let me just, was on at the May meeting, and what happened was that I missed adding it to the agenda. So at the meeting, there was a vote to add an agenda item to the meeting, which was the first reading of the graduation requirements, this policy we're discussing right now, some board committees and meeting conduct. So you will find it in the minutes, but not in the agenda. I'm trying to hold on. How do I? So that is what happened, and that is why Ms. Brody cannot find it. This was the May meeting. So at 4.5, there was a motion to add agenda item to the meeting. This was back to the previous board, and then it was these policies that were added as a first reading. Then the vote took place in June of 2022. To answer that question, now we can continue the discussion of, whether the board wants to change it back.
Okay, thank you for the prompt clarity, Christina. I guess I'll turn it back to Ms. Board Member Brody and then Board Member Mills.
So if it was added that way, I'm now wondering, because trust me, if I would have heard anything, I would have been on it. And I'm not even going to say what I want to say, how it ended up for a vote. But if we're just saying, I'm wondering, was it on the consent agenda? Because if you're saying, oh, we're just talking the first, like, was it talked about? Was it read? I'm wondering the integrity of how this got through a first read, to be honest. Because I could not find it just skimming the agenda, but I'll go back. That may not be here or there, but yeah. But that's just my thing, just the importance of these individuals, just to provide a little bit. We've struggled with principals coming, like it was like an influx from New York and Georgia and from everywhere. It was a concern to the community. And we kind of lost touch of, I'll speak for myself, lost touch of who is leading our schools, and even making sure that we're following or giving voice to the school communities, because we've had entire school communities saying that ain't the person we wanted, and this is the reasons why. So it allows us to better ask better questions of them and know if this is the best candidate for our schools, as opposed to just being totally out of the situation and letting the superintendent have the full power to make this appointment without any board input or knowledge. Because it's some principals I don't know them. I don't know where they're from. I have not seen their resume. I hadn't had a chance to say, are you the best to lead the school community? All of that. And it's just very concerning to me. So that's why I thought it was important to bring it back to the board.
You're
Thank
muted,
you,
but I'm
Member
just going to
Brody.
assume I'm
Board
allowed
Member
to talk.
Mills.
Yeah, so y'all know me. I am loath to add anything to the time of our regular board meetings. However, I do think that this is an excellent reason to. So I would 100% be fully on board with changing it so that we have more of a say on at least approving the principles. I think that it's an incredible thing to do. And I think that as a board, we should be taking more of an interest in issues like this. So while I expect that it will add more time to our already lengthy meetings, I think that it is an appropriate thing for us to do. That is all.
Thank you, Board Member Mills. Board Member Walker.
Thank you. In addition to endorsing the recommendation, I wanted to add a little bit of flavor by addressing the question you'd asked. We did have, I guess, for the first 6 months that I was on the board, or a little bit more than 6 months, the principals did come before the board. Their coming for the board before the board was a little bit ceremonial in that it had been agreed that by the time they had reached the board, an offer had been given. And so we understood that this principal was the principal that was going to be hired. But there was great value. And let's say in doing that, maybe 8 times out the year, let's say if we make 8 or 9 principal hires a year, that means 8 or 9 times, you'd meet this principal, and in saying that there'd be a session where they'd be on the agenda, their resume, their background be presented in our packet. So you'd have an opportunity to read and see who they are as a person. It did provide the opportunity for the board, even if not totally officially hiring them, it allowed the board to express its values and views to the principal and set up some expectation in terms of, the board can share what our values and views and expectations are. And it became a really good opportunity to get to meet and humanize and know who that person was. And so it is worthy of adding that to the meeting. I think it was of value. And it also helped us to understand when the culture of a school would be changing, because when a new principal is coming on board. Right now, I agree with Board Member Brody. I only found out after the fact, when people have questions or concerns or issues, but then it's already after the fact. So that's my take of how it existed prior to this change.
Can I
Thank
add, through you, Madam Chair, totally not accurate, Mr. Walker. If the board votes, you are not the person. The hired is not a done deal.
Oh,
Yeah, the board
yes.
vote, the superintendent would say to the board, this is the candidate that I feel should be hired after a process has happened, but the board has full authority to say no. We've heard from the school community, we've just feel based on the whatever your reasoning may be, if you don't get those votes, that hire is not happening, period. So it's not a done deal. That's all I wanted to add.
And through the chair, you allow me, I will defer to Board Member Brody. She is correct. That is actually the letter of the law, how it went down. I think what I was meaning to express is I did not experience the situation where the board voted down someone, but she is correct. It is in the board's power to actually not approve a principal that is recommended by the superintendent. So yes, Board Member Brody's recitation is the accurate way of looking at it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this policy? Okay, if none, then I think we are in a position, Christina, to bring it for a first reading at our next meeting, or correct? So the next sort of logical step will be a first reading, and then a second reading so the board could vote.
Yes, and to clarify, it would go back to the language it was before, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yes, so yes, I can bring it for first reading if that is a consensus, yes.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all for your time. See you in a couple of weeks. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
See you tomorrow.